My daughter looked at me with a practiced, pitying tone as she delivered the news. I was no longer the mistress of my estate. A physician's note, a temporary guardianship, and suddenly, my son-in-law was blocking the door to my mansion. My life was packed into boxes lining the driveway while Mark declared me a ward of the state. He thought he was ushering a defenseless old woman into oblivion. He didn't see me checking my watch. He didn't know the hostile takeover clock had just started ticking. Listen to the end to see my next move, and subscribe for more stories of justice. The keypad's enter button feels cold against my thumb. Not the comfortable cold of a Boston evening settling into brass and steel, the kind of cold I've known for 20 years stepping through my own gate. This is different. This is the cold of something that has already decided against me. I punch in the code. Muscle memory, 2741 pound. The sequence I've entered thousands of times, in rain and in snow and in the dark after late nights at the firm when the city was asleep and this house was the only light I needed. The red light blinks back at me, steady, deliberate, mocking. Not the quick amber flash of a misky. A sustained, red, declarative no. I punch it again. Same response. The salt-heavy air off the harbor stings the back of my throat. I'm standing on the bluestone path I chose myself, beneath the elm I had transplanted from western Massachusetts at considerable expense, in front of the heavy oak door I commissioned from a craftsman in Vermont who is now, almost certainly, dead. I am 65 years old, I have argued before federal circuit courts, I have reduced opposing counsel to stammering, and I am standing on my own doorstep like a delivery driver who has misread the address. This isn't a glitch. I know a lockout when I see one. I wrote enough eviction language in my career to recognize the grammar of it. My thumb finds the brooch at my lapel, an automatic gesture, a check. The small, warm pressure of the lens cap beneath my fingertip. Still there. Still active. Good. I let my face do nothing at all and turn to look at what they've done to my driveway. It takes a moment for my eyes to process what I'm seeing, the way the brain refuses, briefly, to accept information that carries a certain grade of violence. Cardboard boxes. Dozens of them. Arranged in uneven rows along the cobblestone driveway like some grotesque inventory sale, like the aftermath of a life auctioned off in an afternoon. 30 years of a Tier 1 career. 30 years of this house, this estate, this name, reduced to packing tape and black marker scrawl. I walk toward them before I've decided to. My heels click against the cobblestone and then go silent on the gravel edging. I stop beside the nearest stack and look. My hand-bound law journals, 12 volumes, a custom commission from a bindery in Cambridge that charged accordingly and was worth every dollar, shoved into a box without tissue paper, their spines bent against the cardboard flap. My grandmother's crystal decanters, wrapped in what appears to be newspaper. The charcoal tweed blazers. 4 of them. I bought them over a decade, replacing each one only when the wool began to lose its structure, because a woman in a room full of men cannot afford to look like she's dressed for anything less than complete authority. Someone has folded them improperly, left sleeve over right, the way a person folds a blazer who has never understood what a blazer is for. And then I see the Hermes scarf. Silk. A deep navy with a gold bridal pattern. My husband gave it to me the year I made senior partner, before the celebration dinner, before the speeches. He knotted it himself, badly, and laughed, and I pretended it looked perfect. It is lying in the damp gravel. Not folded, not wrapped. Lying there with the patient helplessness of something that has been discarded by a person who does not know its value. Seeing my life packed by someone else's hands is not grief. Grief is what I felt at Robert's funeral, standing at the gravesite in February, my fingers going numb inside my gloves. This is something cleaner and colder than grief. This is the feeling of a contract violation, the specific, clarifying outrage of watching something you built with precision and intention being handled by people who don't understand what it is. I reach down and lift the scarf from the gravel. Fold it. Slip it into my coat pocket. Then I turn toward the porch. The front door opens. They've been watching, of course. There will be a camera now, where there wasn't before, or they've simply been waiting at the window like impatient heirs. The warm light from my foyer, the chandelier I had rewired twice before the electrician finally achieved the amber tone I wanted, frames them against the evening like a tableau. Paige. My daughter. She's wearing a camel-colored designer trench coat and her hands are working the belt, cinching and releasing, the fidget of a woman managing her conscience in real time. She can't quite meet my gaze. She had my eyes once, before she decided they were inconvenient. Mark stands slightly in front of her, which tells me everything I need to know about who is running this operation. He has his feet shoulder-width apart, his hands loose at his sides, occupying the porch with the physical confidence of a man who has just taken possession of something. He's wearing a charcoal suit that costs more than his ethics. His close-set eyes scan me with the brisk appraisal of a man calculating whether his investment is performing as expected. They don't look like family. I've stood across the table from liquidators. I know what that particular combination of false gravity and suppressed excitement looks like. They are the people who photograph the furniture before the estate sale, who wear neutral expressions and neutral shoes and have a number in mind before they sit down. The silence between us is nothing like the silences I shared with my daughter when she was small, when silence meant safety, when it meant we had run out of words because the evening was enough. This silence is clinical. Scalpel sharp. I wait for one of them to speak first, because I am still a lawyer, even standing on my own gravel. Mother. Paige's voice is a carefully assembled thing. She's been practicing, I realize. I can hear the rehearsal and the pauses, the way her inflection rises slightly on words intended to project concern. Please don't make this harder. She holds up a manila folder the way one holds a crucifix against something that frightens you. She speaks. The words emerge in the practiced, neutralized cadence of someone reading from a prepared statement, which, I suspect, is exactly what this is. A neurological evaluation. A physician. Cognitive decline. Incapacity. She uses the word vulnerability the way people use it when they want to strip you of authority while appearing to protect you. She tells me it's for my own safety. That this is what the family needs. That there's a lovely place ready for me. I stand with my back perfectly straight, the iron rod that 40 years of high-stakes litigation installed in my spine, and I watch her mouth move and I feel, somewhere beneath the cold assessment that has already begun compiling its case, a single note of grief. Not for myself. For her. For the daughter who used to fall asleep against my shoulder on late flights home from my depositions, who grew up in the safety of this house and learned, from somewhere I cannot identify, that safety was something to be seized rather than given. I do not let any of this touch my face. What physician? I ask. My voice is level. A question in a deposition, nothing more. Paige's belt fidgeting quickens. Mark steps in. He snaps the document open with a flourish. It's a practice gesture, the kind men use in conference rooms when they want the paper to make a sound, to establish that this is real, this is legal, this is over. Temporary emergency guardianship, he says. The words land with the flat satisfaction of a man who has been waiting to say them. He points to the signature block the way one points to a verdict. A judge's name I don't recognize. A date from 3 days ago. I look at the document. I allow myself exactly 4 seconds to read what I need to read. Emergency petition. Signed physician's declaration. Petitioners, Paige M. Holloway and Mark J. Holloway. In the eyes of Massachusetts law, I am no longer the owner of this estate, the principal of my trust, or, in any meaningful sense, a person with standing. I have been converted from a subject to an object, a ward, a liability, a line item in someone else's financial planning. 40 years of law. 3 federal cases. The Thornton Family Trust, which I drafted myself over 4 sessions with a pot of coffee and a yellow legal pad because I didn't trust anyone else's language, and it has been temporarily suspended by a piece of paper signed by a stranger. The transition from matriarch to prisoner takes approximately the time it requires to flip a legal page. I let Mark read my face for a reaction, and I give him the one thing that will disturb him most: nothing at all. He descends the porch steps. His footsteps are heavy on the gravel. He walks like a man who has always been larger than the rooms he inhabits. When he reaches me, his hand comes down on my shoulder. Thick fingers. The grip of a man who was once athletic and has kept the muscle reflex even as the rest has softened. The pressure is firm in the way that power dressed as courtesy is always firm, plausibly supportive, unmistakably controlling. I feel the tremor in it. Adrenaline, barely leashed. He is enjoying this. He begins to steer me toward the black SUV parked at the end of the driveway, and the smell of him reaches me: expensive cologne, something cedar-heavy, the kind of scent chosen to signal authority. "We have a lovely place set up for you, Diana," he murmurs, pitched low, as if we're having a private moment rather than an eviction. The tone is the one adults use with children who are being unreasonable. Gentle. Patient. Absolutely certain of its own correctness. My left shoe catches slightly on the gravel lip where the cobblestone path meets the driveway edge, and for one fraction of a second his hand tightens, catching me or ensuring I don't turn back. I allow myself to be moved. I allow him this. I note the pressure of his grip, the direction of his gaze, one last look toward the second-floor study window, and I file both observations away. My right arm presses against my ribs, and I feel the handbag there, the Italian leather I bought in Milan 15 years ago, still flawless because quality lasts when you select it correctly. Beneath my thumb, I find the inner seam of the lining without looking. The tiny ridge of doubled stitching. The reassuring, papery crinkle of folded bills. $2,000. $100 bills, 20 of them, sealed in a slim envelope and sewn into the lining of this bag on a Tuesday evening in September, while Mark was having dinner with someone from his firm and Paige was at her book club and I was sitting at my desk with a curved needle and linen thread, listening to the silence of the house and thinking about contingencies. I started noticing things in August. The way Mark lingered at the door of my study after dinner, pausing a moment too long, his eyes going to the safe bolted into the east wall. The way Paige began referring to the estate as the property, in casual conversation, a subtle linguistic displacement that attorneys recognize immediately as the first step of reclassification. The way certain envelopes from my financial institution began arriving already opened, the flap resealed with a slight crease that wasn't there before. $2,000 is nothing in the context of my accounts. It's a rounding error, a tip at a charity gala, a single-line item in my quarterly expenditures. But it exists outside any account Mark can freeze, outside any asset he can claim as under guardianship jurisdiction. It exists because I carry it in a bag that never leaves my body. It is not a fortune. It is a first move. Mark expects something from me, even now. I can feel it in the way he opens the SUV door with that slightly excessive courtesy, holding it longer than necessary, watching my face as I lower myself into the seat. He expects tears, perhaps. Or argument. Or the brittle, raised voice panic of a woman who has been cornered and knows it. He needs that. He built his guardianship narrative on it: the erratic widow, the deteriorating mind, the woman who can no longer be trusted to manage her own affairs. I give him nothing. I sit in the rear seat and I arrange my coat. I set my handbag on my lap with both hands resting on it, and I look at my watch. The Patek Philippe. Robert gave it to me on our 25th anniversary. White gold case, cream dial, a movement so precise that in 30 years it has lost less than 2 minutes. I've worn it every day since he died, because it was calibrated to a standard he would have approved of. 6:14 p.m. I hold the time in my mind the way I hold a key piece of evidence, carefully, without crushing it. The door closes. The lock engages with a soft, definitive click. In the sudden quiet of the sealed car, my mind opens the file. My study at the estate, late autumn, the drafting lamp making a warm circle on the yellow legal pad while Boston went cold and dark outside the window. I was building the Thornton family trust in the weeks after Robert's first cardiac event, when the world had briefly reminded me that nothing is guaranteed and everything must be protected in writing. The standard provisions took 3 sessions. The poison pill took 4 hours. The language was precise because I was the one writing it, and I do not write imprecise language. In the event of the physical displacement of the settler from the primary residence designated herein for a period exceeding 48 consecutive hours, executed without the documented and witnessed consent of the settler, all beneficiary designations and rights of access shall be immediately suspended pending a full forensic audit conducted by an independent fiduciary appointed by the trusts. Senior Oversight Council. Not 49 hours. Not 72. 48. They drove me away from my own gate at 6:14 p.m. on a Thursday evening. By 6:14 p.m. on Saturday, the trust will have activated automatically. No court filing required. No motion from me. The provision is self-executing. I wrote it that way deliberately, because I understood even in 1998 that the moment I needed to invoke it, I might not be in a position to file anything. They think they've evicted a confused old woman. They have pulled the pin on a grenade I buried 25 years ago. The SUV moves through the gates, and I permit myself one look back. The cobblestone driveway, the elm, the porch, the warm light through the windows of a house that still holds the specific gravity of 30 years of my life. The cardboard boxes, still heaped by the driveway, as if whoever packed them couldn't quite finish the job of making my exit look orderly. And Mark, standing on the porch steps, turned toward the second-floor window. He's looking at my study. At the east-facing window behind which the safe sits, bolted into the wall behind the false panel I had installed because I once had a very wealthy client who lost everything to a son who found his documents, and I decided then that some things should require an extra door. He looks like a man who believes he has already won. The posture of someone surveying what he's about to own, doing the mental math of inheritance. He has no idea. The safe holds what I placed in it 4 months ago, a beautifully produced set of documents that look, to anyone without a forensic eye, exactly like the original trust. Same paper weight. Same ink density. Same signature, reproduced via a process that cost me $1,200 and the discretion of a man who asked no questions. Same notary seal, transferred via a technique I will not document here. Mark will spend his time guarding a room full of exquisitely crafted fiction. The city lights replace the dark of the estate's neighborhood. Boston at evening, the amber glow of street lamps on wet pavement, the harbor smell thinning as we move inland, the traffic thickening and then clearing again in the rhythms I've navigated for 40 years. I adopt the expression they want. The vacant, slightly unfocused look of a woman who is processing a confusing evening, eyes soft, hands still, a faint, uncertain quality to my gaze that I have seen on the faces of actual clients in the early stages of genuine decline, and which I reproduce now the way I reproduce everything, precisely, purposefully, and without sentiment. Mark is on his Bluetooth headset within 3 minutes. The call is brief, 2 sentences to someone I can't identify, confirming that it went smoothly. Paige is in the front passenger seat, her profile visible in the tinted glass reflection, her head slightly bowed. She may be looking at her phone. She may be looking at nothing. I count the streetlights on Commonwealth Avenue. I note the turn onto Tremont. I catalog each word Mark says into his headset with the same filing method I used for 30 years. Who said it, when, what it implies, what it might prove. I am not a mother in this car. I am not a widow, or a ward, or a confused elderly woman being transported to a suitable care arrangement. I am a litigator preparing for discovery. 48 hours. The number runs beneath everything like a bass note, steady and patient. They are driving me through the city, and with every mile, the clock advances. By the time they deliver me to wherever they've arranged, the countdown will already be 11 minutes old. I close my eyes, which they will interpret as exhaustion or confusion, both equally useful to me. Behind my eyelids, I open the file in full. The provisions activate. The brooch captures. The $2,000 waits in the lining of my handbag. And somewhere in a safety deposit box at a bank that Mark has no knowledge of, the real trust document sits in a manila envelope with a note on top addressed to my former senior partner at the firm. I have not practiced law in 4 years. But I remember something a federal judge told me once, early in my career, when I was 29 and had just won a case everyone told me was unwinnable. The most dangerous litigant is the one who appears to have nothing left to lose. I am 65 years old. I have been locked out of my home, handed to my son-in-law's car, and stripped of my legal personhood in the time it took the sun to set. Mark and Paige have played what they believe is a winning hand, a decisive, rapid strike takeover of a $45 million estate belonging to a woman they decided was no longer a threat. They played it against the woman who wrote the rules of the game. I settle into the leather seat, and I feel, beneath the cold and the outrage and the single, buried note of grief for my daughter, something else entirely, the clean, invigorating clarity of a complex strategy that has just been set in motion. I open my eyes. I am ready. The SUV brakes hard. My hands absorb the lurch without gripping. I've trained myself, over years of turbulent flights and tense depositions, not to reveal stress through reflex. The neighborhood arrives in fragments through the tinted glass, a flickering street lamp with the stuttering quality of something long neglected, a bodega with a hand-lettered sign, the thick, specific smell of bus exhaust that seeps into sealed vehicles and settles on the back of the tongue. Then the building. Brutalist concrete, 5 stories, the architectural philosophy of a regime that believed comfort was a form of weakness. The facade is painted a gray that has been peeling long enough to have developed its own texture, layers of gray beneath gray, like geological strata of institutional disappointment. Several windows on the second floor have cardboard where glass should be. The entrance is flanked by 2 concrete planters that have been filled, at some point, with something that died and was never replaced. Mark kills the engine. The silence in the car arrives like a third passenger. He sits for a moment, looking at the building with an expression I know well, the practiced neutrality of a man suppressing contempt for something he finds beneath him, because acknowledging the contempt would require acknowledging what he's done. Then he turns to check his watch. The gesture is reflexive, involuntary. He's already thinking about the drive back. About my study. About the safe. It's temporary, Diana, he says. He does not look at me when he says it. The apartment is on the 3rd floor. The elevator is out of service. A hand-lettered sign taped to the doors reads out of service since NOV, with no year specified, as if specificity stopped mattering. We take the stairs. Mark carries my 2 suitcases, which is the single gesture of assistance he offers, and he carries them with the specific impatience of a man performing a task he finds degrading, setting them down on the landing while I climb and then scooping them up again with a grunt that contains several things he isn't saying. The hallway smells of industrial citrus, the aggressive, synthetic lemon of cleaning products designed to eliminate odors rather than resolve the conditions that create them. Beneath it, something else, the accumulated weight of other people's long winters. Old cooking, old carpet, old stillness. The door to the apartment opens into something that manages to be both small and empty at the same time. The walls are the color of a tooth. Not quite white, not quite yellow, the specific shade of eggshell that appears in paint catalogs but in practice looks like surfaces that have absorbed decades of ambient smoke. The furniture is substantial and indestructible, heavy oak built to outlast its occupants, the chairs and table and bed frame of an institution, selected for durability rather than any aspiration toward the human. There is one window. It faces an alleyway and has been fitted with a security bar across the exterior glass. One window. Barred. Facing a wall. Mark drops my suitcases. The thud echoes off the linoleum and the bare walls and returns to us with the hollow resonance of a space that has nothing to absorb sound. He looks around the apartment with the brisk assessment of a man checking a delivery against a manifest, confirming that the necessary components are present. Bed. Table. Chair. Bathroom. Adequate. This is not a residence. I've seen enough elder law cases in my career to recognize a holding cell when I'm standing in one. I've argued against these arrangements in probate court, the slow, quiet disappearance of a person into a room just like this, where the legal machinery can finish its work undisturbed. I walk to the center of the room and stand there and I look at it, and I do not allow my face to show what I think. She arrives from the interior of the apartment. She must have been waiting, which means she had a key, which means this was arranged in advance with sufficient lead time to brief the caregiver before I arrived. Another data point. She is a large woman, broad across the shoulders, wearing navy scrubs with the practical, undecorated quality of someone who has stopped thinking about clothing as anything other than functional. Her face has the settled permanence of a person who has decided not to be surprised by anything and found this a sustainable arrangement. She does not smile. She performs, instead, a rapid visual assessment of me, the specific kind of scan I have seen social workers use on intake, checking for distress markers, checking for agitation, checking for the behaviors that populate a committal report. In her left hand, a leather-bound logbook. Not a phone, not a tablet. A physical logbook, with a pen clipped to the cover. "This is Brenda," Mark says. "She'll be staying with you to help with." "With what?" I ask. The question is mild, curious, the voice of a woman simply seeking clarification. Mark's jaw tightens slightly. "To help with your transition." I give Brenda the smile I reserve for people who have been positioned to work against me, open, slightly vague, the smile of a woman who is not quite tracking all of this. "How kind," I say. Brenda writes something in the logbook. Mark sets a plastic card on the laminate table. He doesn't hand it to me, he sets it down in the center of the surface as if placing a chip on a casino table, which is, in a sense, exactly what he's doing. "Prepaid debit," he says, adopting the careful, slowed enunciation one uses with people whose comprehension is uncertain. $200 on it. For essentials. We've had to freeze the Amex and the investment accounts, standard protective procedure while the guardianship is formalized, to prevent any, impulsive decisions. I look at the card. Then I look at him. He is parching me. I have argued this in court, the financial isolation of the guardianship subject, the severing of their access to capital, which ensures that even if they possess the clarity to seek legal help, they cannot pay for it. Cut off the oxygen and the fire dies without your having to do anything so crude as extinguishing it yourself. Mark is not the first person to use this maneuver. He is merely the first one to use it on me. 200, I repeat, in a tone that suggests I find this a perfectly reasonable number. He can't hear what I'm actually saying, which is, you have no idea what my real currency is. The Thornton Family Trust, the genuine one, the document that Mark believes is sitting in a safe 40 minutes away, is a 400-page instrument of staggering complexity that I built over 7 years, refining it after every major legal development in Massachusetts estate law. Mark has looked at it, presumably. He has had someone look at it. But looking at a document written at that level of technical precision, written specifically to appear to have certain vulnerabilities, is like standing at the base of an avalanche and seeing it as a ski slope. I pocket the debit card with both hands, slightly fumbling, the way a woman who is not entirely sure of her hands might handle something small. Mark leaves, briefly, to take a call in the hallway. Brenda has moved into the kitchen area, audibly filling a kettle. The moment the door closes, the room shifts. Paige enters. She crosses the apartment in 4 steps, there are only 4 steps in any direction, and positions herself between me and the door, which is telling. She has her arms folded across her chest, the camel trench coat buttoned now, and her face is doing something complicated, the tightness of resolution fighting with something softer and less managed underneath it. She waits for a beat after Mark's voice rises and falls in the hallway, confirming he's occupied, before she speaks. When she does, her voice drops to something I can only describe as a whisper with weight in it. If you fight the guardianship, Mom, she stops. Restarts. If you make this ugly, I'll file a no-contact order. You won't see the girls. Not birthdays, not holidays, not at all. I'll tell them you're sick. A pause. I'll tell them you're dangerous. The kettle begins to heat in the kitchen. I look at my daughter. I look at her the way I look at every piece of evidence, without judgment, with absolute attention, recording everything. She was 8 years old when Robert and I took her to the Cape for the first time, and she ran into the water without waiting for us, because she was never afraid of cold things. She was 17 when she argued with me for 3 hours about a curfew and won, because she is, at her core, a person who does not accept unfavorable terms without exhausting every available argument. She was 24 when she brought Mark home for Thanksgiving, and I watched him across the table and felt, for the first time in years, the specific professional unease I associate with a counterparty who has not disclosed their full position. I raised her to be precise. To be strategic. To understand that the world rewards those who understand the rules better than everyone else in the room. I simply did not anticipate that she would eventually practice on me. I hear you, I say. My voice is the voice of a woman who is tired, and sad, and perhaps a little confused by the speed of events. She holds my gaze for one moment, looking for something, I think, though I'm not certain she knows what, and then she looks away first. She always looked away first. After they leave, I lower myself into the armchair by the window, the good chair, relatively speaking, the one with the floorboard nearest the heating unit, which I have already noted for later, and I let my face go. Not collapse. Not grief. Simply the deliberate relaxation of the muscles I've been holding for the past 2 hours. I slacken my jaw, very slightly. Let my gaze drift toward the television, which Brenda has turned on to a local news channel, the volume set at the level people use for those they assume aren't really listening. My eyes unfocus in a way that requires a specific muscular adjustment I learned from watching 30 years of clients in the early stages of genuine cognitive decline, whose faces have a particular quality of present but not tracking. I am performing a woman who has lost. Inside that performance, with the precision of a surveyor who has one opportunity to take measurements before the site is closed, I map the apartment. Distance from the chair to the door, 11 feet. The floorboards, old, which means vocal. I've already identified 3 creaking boards from my walk-in, which means I know the silent path. The overhead light creates a trapezoid of shadow in the northwest corner, near the radiator. Brenda's chair is in the kitchen, facing the doorway, which means her sight lines have a natural blind spot at that radiator corner, particularly when the television provides competing stimulus. A woman who has given up is a woman who isn't being watched closely. I know this because I have watched closely. For 40 years, the people who were dismissed, the elderly clients, the quiet women, the ones everyone in the room decided were no longer a threat, those were always the ones who had the most time to think. Brenda retreats to the kitchen, and I hear the specific domestic sounds of tea preparation, the pop of a cupboard, the ceramic clink of a mug located by touch. I give her 40 seconds, counting in my head with the rhythm of a clock. Then I rise from the chair with the efficiency of a woman who has not lost the use of her body, regardless of what the paperwork suggests, and I cross to the bathroom. The bathroom is the size of a generous closet. The mirror above the sink has a crack running diagonally from corner to corner, which gives my reflection a slightly refracted quality, as if I'm being observed from 2 angles simultaneously. I find this appropriate. I adjust the brooch at my lapel. The piece is vintage, or appears to be. Gold filigree, an oval setting with a small amber-colored stone at the center, the kind of brooch that women of my generation wear to funeral receptions and charity luncheons and nowhere in particular. It belonged, ostensibly, to my mother. This is what I would say if anyone asked, which no one has, because no one looks at an elderly woman's lapel long enough to think about what it might contain. My right index finger finds the microswitch in the filigree. The activation requires a specific pressure sequence: slight pressure, release, firm press, to prevent accidental activation from normal contact. I execute it. A microscopic blue light flickers once in the amber setting, then goes dark. The lens is wide angle, 4K, capturing everything in a 120-degree field. The encrypted uplink pushes to a secure cloud server whose access credentials exist only in my memory. The cost of this particular piece of technology, sourced through a firm that asks no questions and invoices as security consulting services, was $4,800. I paid it in cash. I did not mention it to anyone. I look at myself in the cracked mirror. My platinum hair is still immaculate. I dressed for this evening the way I dress for every evening, because the day I stop dressing like myself is the day they've already won. My eyes, in the fractured mirror, look back at me from two slightly different angles. Both of them are completely clear. I smooth my lapel. I return to my chair. I close my eyes and let my head tip slightly toward my shoulder, the universal posture of an old woman napping in front of a television that's set too loud. Brenda glances in from the kitchen doorway. I can monitor her position through the dark screen of the television when it cuts to a commercial with a black background, an imperfect mirror, but sufficient. She looks, holds for a moment, and withdraws. Satisfied. In my right ear, disguised as a hearing aid, flesh-toned, unremarkable, the device that people who don't look closely simply assume is a hearing aid because it occupies the space where hearing aids live, a micro-receiver connects to the security feed I had installed in my estate study 14 months ago by a technician who was paid in cash and recommended by a private firm in Back Bay. The feed crackles. Then resolves. I hear breathing. Heavy, slightly ragged. The specific rhythm of a person under the physical stress of focused effort. The metallic, rhythmic clink-clink-clink of a locksmith's tool working a mechanism. And then, low and thick with effort and frustration, Mark's voice, "Come on, you old bitch." I sit perfectly still in my chair, eyes closed, hands folded in my lap, and feel something move through my chest that isn't warmth exactly, but functions like it. The cold, clean satisfaction of a prediction confirmed. He is exactly where I want him, in my study, working on my safe, entirely convinced that he is alone and unobserved. His frustration is information, the safe is resisting him, which means my timeline is holding. He hasn't breached the inner compartment yet. Desperate and overstepping. I could not have written him better myself. 20 minutes later, through the audio feed, the tenor of his breathing changes. I have been monitoring it with the disciplined patience of a woman who spent 4 decades in a profession where listening, really listening, not waiting to speak but actually receiving and cataloging, was the primary skill. The frustration is still there, but the rhythm has steadied. He's past the initial resistance. Then the visual feed from the study activates, he's moved within the camera's range, and the image resolves through my receiver in the compressed, slightly greenish quality of low-light security feed. Mark at my desk. My mahogany desk, the surface I have occupied for 30 years, surrounded by the accumulated intelligence of a career. He's opened the center drawer and removed something I recognize, my fountain pen. Heavy gold, a Pelican M1000 that I've used to sign more contracts than I can count. The weight of it is specific and familiar even at this distance, through this medium. He sets it beside a stack of documents I can't fully read at this resolution, but the format is clear: wire transfer authorizations. Multiple pages. He uncaps the pen with both hands, the gesture of someone handling a tool they don't own. He begins to practice my signature. I watch him do it. I watch him work through the initial clumsy attempts. He gets the D right on the first try, but my characteristic downward slash on the I of my surname eludes him for several minutes, until he finds the rhythm of it. The way my hand moves, a slight leftward lean, the deliberate pressure on the upstroke, the long tail on the final A. He's forging my signature on wire transfer authorizations. $5 million. Moving to a shell company structure in the Cayman Islands. I watch him sign my name, and I feel, beneath the cold, clarifying satisfaction of watching a crime being committed in 4K resolution directly into my secure cloud server, a flicker of something almost like aesthetic offense. He's using my pen. That is the particular detail that my mind lands on and holds. He is using the pen I used to sign the Thornton Family Trust. Every stroke is a future year in a federal penitentiary. I count them as they accumulate. Then, a sound from the audio feed that shifts register. A muffled, mechanical sequence, the safe's inner compartment yielding to whatever tool he's used, and then a single, triumphant, wholly unguarded, yes. I hear the rustle of paper. He's pulled the documents. He doesn't know what he's holding. That's the nature of excellent forgery. The value of a document is established by its appearance, and the appearance of these documents is impeccable. I spent 3 weeks on the aging process alone, the Earl Grey tea for the initial tanning, the controlled sun exposure to yellow the edges without compromising the ink, the deliberate humidity cycling to give the paper the texture of something that has lived in a file for decades. The signature on the final page matches every verified exemplar of my writing on file with the Massachusetts bar. The errors I built into those documents are not visible. They are structural. The kind of flaws that look, from a certain angle, like loopholes, openings a greedy man would see as opportunities, pathways to faster access, simpler claims. He will have a lawyer review them, and that lawyer will find what I planted, and they will think they have found a gift. What they have found is a sequence of provisions that lead, with apparent inevitability, toward a legal position from which there is no exit. Mark is holding a bomb. He thinks he's won the lottery. I settle back into my chair, eyes still closed, hands folded, and permit myself the small, private economy of a smile that does not reach my face. Brenda has a routine. I established this in the first 3 hours of her company. She is, as institutions tend to produce, a creature of reliable pattern. Every hour, she makes a notation in her logbook. I've watched her do it 4 times now, always at approximately the same interval, always with the same 3-second pause beforehand where she appears to be deciding how to phrase whatever she's writing. She prefers tea to coffee, has made 2 cups in 4 hours, each cup taking roughly 4 minutes to prepare. She owns a phone with a cracked screen and checks it during commercial breaks. And every hour, at approximately the 40-minute mark, she goes to the fire escape. The first time, I registered it as a departure. The second time, I tracked the duration, 9 minutes. The third time, I confirmed it, 9 minutes, regular as a deposition break. She leaves her logbook open on the counter, and her phone beside it, face up. She does not look at me before she goes, because she has already decided, from the evidence of 3 hours of my vacant television watching and my slow, slightly confused responses to her check-in questions, that I am not a flight risk or an action risk or any kind of risk at all. She assumes I'm too far gone to notice. People have been making this assumption since I was 26 years old, and it has never once served them well. Brenda's lighter flicks. The small, domestic click of a disposable, followed by the soft exhale of a woman finally alone with her habit. I move. Not quickly, quickly is conspicuous, and I have the floorboard map memorized. I step over the first creaking board, transfer my weight to the left where the floor is stable, and reach the armchair in 3 silent steps. From my handbag, the envelope I prepared this morning, before all of this began. Inside, a spare key. The key to a safety deposit box at a bank whose name Mark doesn't know, in a branch I've used only twice, established under a layer of my professional history that predates his entry into this family. Inside that box, the Real Trust document. An encrypted drive containing the forensic evidentiary record I've been building for 4 months. A sealed letter to my former senior partner at the firm, with instructions that activate upon its receipt. From the lining of my handbag, the $2,000, released from its stitched pocket with the small tearing sound of preparation. I kneel by the radiator. My joints register their opinion of this, a protest from both knees, the specific complaint of a body that is 65 years old and has been put through an eviction today. I acknowledge the complaint and proceed. The floorboard I identified earlier, fourth from the radiator base, slightly raised at the left edge, lifts with the application of pressure at the correct angle. Beneath it, a small cavity in the subfloor. Not unusual in a building of this age. I place the envelope and the cash bundle in the cavity, set the floorboard back, and press it level. This is the cash. If they escalate, if Mark moves against me in a way that takes me somewhere I cannot access a telephone or a bathroom mirror, the evidence must survive. The housekeeper will know where to look. She will have been told, in a communication I arranged before tonight, to visit this apartment. When she does, I need only find 2 minutes alone with her. I am back in the chair before Brenda's cigarette has reached its halfway point. My coat is arranged. My hands are folded. The television is showing a car insurance commercial at the volume of something that doesn't quite require attention. I close my eyes. From the fire escape, the quiet sound of a woman who thinks she is the only one awake, breathing smoke into a Boston night that neither of us will remember. She is not the only one awake. She is not the only one with a plan. The buzzer splits the apartment's quiet like a scalpel. Brenda is on her feet before the second pulse, her logbook open to a fresh page. She dates entries in advance, I've noticed, the practice of someone who has learned to document before the fact rather than after. I keep my eyes on the television and let my hands remain folded in my lap, the picture of a woman for whom a buzzer is a vaguely confusing event occurring at a manageable distance. Through the intercom's small speaker, a voice, familiar as the sound of my own foyer, familiar as 20 years of Tuesday mornings and the smell of strong coffee and floor wax. Mrs. Gable. Brenda answers, exchanges brief words, and then makes the error that well-meaning institutional caretakers always make. She decides to handle the situation herself rather than refer it upward, because referring it upward would require admitting she wasn't prepared for it. She buzzes the door without consulting anyone and positions herself in the apartment doorway with her logbook held across her chest like a clipboard shield. Mrs. Gable comes down the hallway with the specific momentum of a woman who has decided this is not a conversation she will be stopped from having. She looks, frayed is the word. Her coat, the good charcoal wool she wears for any occasion she deems official, is buttoned one hole off, which tells me everything about the speed at which she left and the state she left in. She's been fired, I know this, I anticipated this, and the firing has taken something from her posture that being fired always takes from people who have organized their lives around reliability and service. But her chin is up. In her arms, pressed against her chest with both hands, a bundle of envelopes. Misdirected mail. The cover story is simple because it doesn't require much architecture. Mrs. Gable has been bringing my mail for 20 years. The idea that she would continue to do so, out of habit, out of stubbornness, out of the particular loyalty of a person who views their work as an extension of their character, requires no explanation. The mail is for Mrs. Thornton's eyes only, she says to Brenda, in the tone she once used on a plumber who had the temerity to track mud across her freshly mopped foyer. The domestic indignation is genuine, which makes it impenetrable. I'm not handing it to anyone else. I watch through the reflection in the dark television screen as Brenda's posture stiffens, and then, in the slight forward hunch of a woman who is deciding this particular battle isn't worth the paperwork, relents. Mrs. Gable steps into the apartment. Her eyes find mine immediately, past Brenda, past the institutional furniture, past the careful mask I've been wearing, and the look that passes between us contains the full weight of 20 years. She's looking for the woman she once knew, and she finds her. I can see the moment she does, the subtle settling of her shoulders, the intake of breath. I give her nothing that Brenda can read. A vague, slightly pleased smile. The expression of an old woman recognizing a familiar face. Brenda, I say. My voice carries the calculated tremor of a woman managing an emotion imperfectly, which is to say, I make myself sound slightly overwhelmed by the visit, the kind of gentle confusion that reads as sweet. I think something's burning. Brenda turns toward the kitchen. It's a 3-second window, which is exactly 3 seconds more than I need. I reach out and grip Mrs. Gable's wrist. My grip surprises her. I feel it in the small startled tension of her forearm, the way her eyes drop to my hand. She expected the grip of an elderly woman. She got the grip of a woman who has not lost the use of her hands or anything else. I pull her toward me, close enough that my breath warms her ear, and I speak in the compressed, rapid cadence of a closing argument delivered against a time limit. Under the radiator. Floorboard. Take it to the branch on Liberty Street. Use the code 0812. I release her wrist. She's good. She has always been good, it's why I hired her and why I kept her for 2 decades. She processes the information without a visible reaction, and then she stumbles, near the radiator, one hand bracing against the wall, the other dropping briefly to her boot cuff. The envelope containing the safety deposit box key and the $2,000 slides into the boot with the smooth efficiency of a woman who, I suddenly realize, may have anticipated something like this. She's had 20 years to learn how I operate. She straightens. Offers me the mail bundle with a slightly flustered, apologetic smile for Brenda. Here you are, Mrs. Thornton. I'm sorry to have made such a fuss. Brenda returns from the kitchen. Nothing was burning, which she suspected, and she makes a note of my misdirection in the logbook with a look that tells me she's upgrading her assessment of my cognitive status from foggy to intermittently manipulative. Fine. Let her write that. The handoff is clean. The evidence is in transit. The private nurse arrives at 11 in the morning, which I calculate is approximately 32 hours into the 48. She has the exhausted, efficient quality of someone working multiple positions, the slight shadows beneath her eyes that aren't cosmetic, the practiced speed with which she sets up the blood pressure cuff, the way she's already thinking about the next appointment before she's finished with this one. Mark pays for this service because the optics of guardianship require at least a veneer of medical attention. It is the minimum expenditure necessary to make the arrangement look like care rather than captivity. Brenda retreats to the kitchen with her logbook, because blood pressure checks are medical and therefore outside her documentation purview. I observed this during yesterday's visit, filed it, and waited. The nurse reaches for my left arm. I extend it. And then I press $200 bills into her palm. She goes still. Not frightened, she's past the age where unexpected money makes her afraid, she's at the age where it makes her pay attention. Her eyes come up to mine, and I hold them with the gaze I use in depositions, direct, clear, completely certain of itself. I fold her fingers over the bills. Then I slip a folded note into the pocket of her scrubs, small, the size of a business card, folded in thirds. Deliver this to Arthur Sterling at Sterling & Associates on Federal Street, I say. My voice is quiet and level. Tell him the Blue Sky file is open. She looks at me for a long moment. I watch her reading the situation, the bills, the apartment, the logbook visible through the kitchen doorway, the specific stillness of a woman who needs something delivered by hand. She doesn't ask questions. She nods. She takes my blood pressure, 98/64, excellent, I could argue a brief if they handed me one, records it on her tablet, and zips her bag. On her way out, she pauses at the door with her back to Brenda and looks once more in my direction. A brief, acknowledging look. The look of a woman who has understood the assignment. The door closes behind her. I stare at the television and breathe. Arthur Sterling. My senior partner for 11 years at what was then Thornton, Sterling & Associates, before the name change, before my retirement, before I made the mistake of believing that stepping back from the firm meant I no longer needed the firm's protection. We built the practice together, he with his federal litigation instincts, I with my contract architecture, and in 30 years of partnership, we developed the kind of shorthand that survives geography, retirement, and the passage of time. The blue sky file is not a file. It is a phrase. We established it in 1994 after a client, an elderly widower, was nearly stripped of his estate by a nephew with a forged power of attorney. Arthur and I spent 4 months on that case and won it on a technicality in the document chain. Afterward, over 2 glasses of scotch in his office, we agreed, if either of us was ever in a situation where normal communication was compromised, the phrase blue sky file is open meant I need you, I cannot explain, begin procedures immediately. He'll know what to do with the brooch data. He'll know what the poison pill means. He'll know that every hour that passes, the case assembles itself. 2 hours. I maintain the performance, the vacant television watching, the slow responses to Brenda's check-in questions, the occasional confused repetition of something she's already told me. I am monitoring Brenda's logbook progress in the dark screen reflection, and I am counting the minutes on the Patek Philippe, and I am sitting with the particular quality of patience that 30 years of litigation installs in a person, the patience of someone who has learned that the outcome of a case is almost never determined in the courtroom. Then the lobby buzzer sounds again, and Brenda goes to the intercom, and a voice announces a flower delivery. White lilies. Brenda brings them up herself, large, fresh, the specific cream white of Casablanca lilies in full bloom, wrapped in brown paper with a card tucked into the arrangement. She checks the card with the methodical suspicion of a woman doing her job. Blank. She sets the vase on the laminate counter with the mild uncertainty of someone who doesn't know what to do with an unattributed gift. My heart, for the first time in 33 hours, does something involuntary. White lilies. Arthur and I agreed on this signal in 1996, at the end of a case we nearly lost when a key witness was threatened into silence. We needed a way to confirm receipt of sensitive communications in situations where direct acknowledgement was dangerous. White lilies, delivered without a card, meant, received. Moving. Trust the process. My firm has the data from the brooch. They are mobilizing. I stare at the lilies on the counter, and for one unguarded moment, brief enough that Brenda, who is making a notation, doesn't register it, I allow myself to feel the specific relief of a woman who has been alone in the dark and has just seen, at a very great distance, a light. Not safety. Not yet. But contact. The knowledge that I am no longer operating in isolation, that the machinery I built over 40 years is in motion. The walls of the studio, for just that moment, feel thinner than they did. The atmosphere changes before Mark enters the room. I feel it the way I always feel the shift in a negotiation's weather, a slight drop in ambient pressure, the specific quality of silence that precedes a door opening badly. Brenda hears it too. She straightens in her chair and sets down her mug. Mark comes through the door with his phone in his hand and his face a mottled, suffused purple that I associate, clinically, with a blood pressure in the range of concerning. He is staring at his screen, swiping through what I recognize, from the quality of the images, as the apartment building's cloud sync security feed. Who was here, Brenda? His voice fills the studio completely. It is the voice of a man who has lost the corporate smoothness and gone straight to the core, which is loud and poorly controlled. He swipes the screen, freezes a frame, and thrusts the phone toward her face. Who is that? Mrs. Gable, in the freeze frame, near the radiator. The stumble is visible. From the angle, the boot transfer is not visible. I positioned our exchange exactly to avoid this camera, which I identified on my first day from the lens reflection in the kitchen window, but the proximity to the radiator is visible, and that's enough. His eyes find mine. The mask is gone. The concerned son-in-law, the responsible guardian, the man of difficult but necessary decisions, all of it stripped away in the direct look he gives me now, which is the look of a man who has realized that the thing he thought was contained is still moving. She brought mail, I offer. My voice is tired, slightly confused. I don't know why she. Don't. The word is quiet. Which is worse than loud. He crosses to me in 3 steps and takes my handbag. Not from my hands. From my shoulder, with a grip on the strap that jerks my arm outward before the leather snaps. The sound of the strap breaking, a clean, sharp crack, is surprisingly loud in the small room. Brenda makes a sound and rises from her chair. Mark dumps the bag's contents onto the laminate table with a single, decisive inversion: lipstick, my reading glasses case, tissues, the small leather card wallet, the prepaid debit card, the remaining cash from my coat pocket. Where is the rest of it? His voice is tight, functional, the voice of a man doing math. Who are you talking to? What did she take? He moves to the bookshelf. There is no bookshelf, but there is a built-in shelving unit above the bed, and begins pulling things down. He opens my suitcase, which has been sitting largely untouched because I wear the same clothes I was brought in, and empties it onto the bed. He goes through the bathroom with the speed of a man who is not being careful because he's past caring about careful. He pulls open the kitchen cabinets. Then he sees the lilies. He looks at them for one moment with the expression of a man who knows he doesn't know what he's looking at but knows it matters. Then he picks up the vase and throws it. The Casablanca lilies hit the wall above the radiator, and the glass vase detonates against the iron with a sound like a small explosion: water, glass, white petals, brown paper. The stems slide down the wall and settle on the floor. I flinch. I cannot entirely prevent it. The sound triggers something animal, and my hands come up briefly before I press them back to my thighs. Mark registers the flinch and the register is satisfied. He's looking for evidence that I can be destabilized. He's found some. He gets to the radiator. He kicks it once, twice, and the loose floorboard rattles. He looks at the board for a moment, and then he gets down on one knee with the grunt of a large man performing an undignified task, and pries the board up with his fingers. The cavity is empty. I watch his face. The sequence of expressions takes approximately 4 seconds. First, recognition that there was something here, that the cavity is real and was used. Then, the arithmetic of the timeline: when it was placed, when it was removed, how much time has elapsed. Then, finally, the landing of the full weight of it: he is too late. Whatever was here has already moved. He stays kneeling by the radiator for a moment longer than necessary. A man recalculating. When he rises and turns to face me, the corporate edge has returned, that is more frightening than the rage. The rage is unwieldy. The edge is directed. You think you're so smart, he says. His voice is almost quiet. The tremor in it isn't rage anymore. It's something thinner and more specific. The tremor of a man who, for the first time since this began, is not entirely certain he's winning. You think you can litigate your way out of a psych ward? He pauses, and in the pause, something hardens in his face. Let's see you try. His hand goes to his breast pocket. The document he removes is not a guardianship supplement. I identify this immediately from the format: different colored header, different certification block, and from the specific cold that settles in the room when he opens it. Section 12. Massachusetts Involuntary Commitment Order. He reads from it with the flat precision of a man who has prepared this moment: paranoia, hoarding behavior, secretive and evasive conduct, perceived threat to self. A psychiatrist's signature at the bottom, time-stamped from earlier today. He has had this ready, which means he prepared it before the visit, before the floorboard, before any of tonight's events. He was always planning to escalate. Tonight simply moved the timeline forward. In a secure psychiatric facility, my visitor access is controlled. My phone calls are monitored. My personal effects are inventoried on admission. The brooch, my only active witness, my direct line to 40 hours of evidentiary record, will be logged as a personal item and stored in a locked bag in a closet. My voice will be, in every practical sense, silenced. I look at the document and I look at Mark and I maintain the practiced stillness of a woman who has heard worse news in worse rooms and survived it by refusing to give the room anything to work with. Inside, with the particular precision of a mind that defaults to structure under pressure, I begin to count. The door opens. 2 men. Gray tactical polos, the kind of branded uniform that says professional while meaning institutional. Both large, not hospital staff large, but the specific build of men selected for physical capability rather than medical training. One of them carries a folded gurney under his arm, the black nylon straps hanging loose. They move with the synchronized, unhurried efficiency of people who have done this many times. To them, I understand, I am a category, combative female, geriatric, possible flight risk. A task to be completed before the next call. I am 65 years old. I graduated first in my class at Harvard Law. I argued before the First Circuit at 31 and won. I am a task to be completed. The first orderly approaches my chair with his hand extended, not reaching yet, just presenting the approach, the professional gesture that gives the subject a moment to comply voluntarily. Mrs. Thornton, he says, in the neutral, non-confrontational tone of his training. We're going to help you get ready. Don't touch me. My voice comes out, and it has authority in it, the decades of it, the accumulated weight, but it lacks the room it requires. This is not a courtroom. There is no judge to receive it. There is no opposing counsel who will pause and reconsider. The orderly's expression doesn't change. He takes my elbow. And something in me, something below the legal architecture, below the strategy, below the 40 years of disciplined management of my own responses, reacts. I twist. I pull my arm back with everything I have, which is not nothing. I have maintained the structural discipline of a lifetime, and my body still carries its own authority, and for one moment I am free of his grip. I kick, connecting with something solid, and the satisfaction of it is immediate and shameful in equal measure because satisfaction means fear, and I am afraid, and the fear is real. They take me anyway. 2 of them, and I am 65, and the shame of the struggle is a physical weight, the specific, suffocating shame of losing a physical contest, of having my body override my mind, of the silk blouse tearing at the shoulder seam with a sound that registers as humiliation more than fabric. The cold nylon of the gurney strap against my wrist. The ceiling of the studio, institutional white, swimming in my vision as my back meets the surface. There is no judge here. There is no argument I can make. The hallway lights strobe overhead as they will me out, the fluorescent flicker of a fixture that needs replacing, which I registered on my first day here and which now passes above my face in a rhythmic, disorienting pulse. I am on my back. I am strapped. My platinum hair is disarranged for the first time in memory, and I cannot fix it, and this small indignity sits on top of all the others with a specific weight. Mark stands in the doorway of the studio, and as the gurney passes him, he straightens his tie. Smooths his lapel. He offers me what I can only describe as the smallest possible smile, the smile of a man completing a transaction, the smile of a man who has just authorized a wire transfer and is watching the confirmation screen. His close-set eyes hold mine for exactly as long as it takes the gurney to pass him. Then he looks away. The elevator opens. The doors close. The numbers descend. The ambulance doors close with the heavy, pressurized finality of a world sealing shut. The interior is white and sterile and smells of antiseptic and the specific recycled air quality of a vehicle that has transported many people toward places they did not choose to go. I lie on the gurney. I breathe. The straps across my chest and thighs are firm but not cruel, professional work, note, because my mind will not stop being professional, even in this. Through the small square window above the doors, the Boston evening is visible in the particular amber gray of a city at dusk. On the dashboard, a digital clock. 6:15 p.m. I look at it. I look at it again, because the mind sometimes requires confirmation of the numbers it cannot quite believe it's seeing. 6:15 p.m. I was removed from the Thornton estate at 6:14 p.m., Thursday. I am in this vehicle at 6:15 p.m., Saturday. 48 hours and 1 minute have elapsed since Mark Holloway physically displaced me from my primary residence without my documented, witnessed consent. The ambulance engine turns over. Somewhere in front, the driver pulls away from the curb. Beneath the terror, and the terror is real, I will not pretend otherwise, because I am being transported against my will and I am strapped to a gurney and I have just had my blouse torn. Beneath all of it, something else moves. Something cold. Something with the specific, clarifying temperature of a legal provision activating automatically at a preset threshold. In 1998, at my desk, in the quiet of a late autumn evening, I wrote the following: in the event of the physical displacement of the settler from the primary residence designated herein for a period exceeding 48 consecutive hours, executed without the documented and witnessed consent of the settler, all beneficiary designations and rights of access shall be immediately suspended pending a full forensic audit. The trust is no longer a shield. It is a weapon. And it is not mine to swing. I wrote it that way deliberately, because I knew there would be a day when I couldn't swing anything. It swings itself. Automatically. Upon the clock reaching a number that passed 60 seconds ago. Mark has been moving with the speed of a man who believes urgency is the same as advantage. He forged my signature. He secured the commitment order. He escalated before the timeline could catch him. He was 61 seconds too slow. I close my eyes in the sterile white of the ambulance interior. The Thornton Family Trust has just detonated beneath $45 million worth of beneficiary rights. Mark Holloway is, at this precise moment, driving back to my estate believing he has won. He has not yet looked down. He does not yet know the floor is gone. The ambulance brakes hard. My body absorbs the deceleration against the gurney straps, the chest strap pulls taut, the thigh strap bites, and I register, through the small square window above the doors, the concrete pillars and institutional signage of a private medical facility. The Evergreen Institute. The name is on a brushed steel plaque visible as we swing through the gate, the kind of tasteful, understated lettering that suggests discretion rather than care. This is where the wealthy park their inconvenient relatives. I've had clients who ended up here. I've had clients I kept out of here. The ambulance rolls to a stop. The orderly in the rear reaches for the door handle, and I arrange my face into the cooperative blankness of a woman who has given up the fight, which costs me something, because every cell in my body is doing the opposite of giving up. But I have approximately 30 seconds before those doors open, and I need those 30 seconds for one thing. I press my left hand flat against my sternum, feeling through the torn silk the firm presence of the brooch at my lapel. Still there. Still attached. The microswitch still armed. Whatever happens in the next 5 minutes, the record is intact. The doors swing open. I see the medical bay, institutional concrete, fluorescent overhangs, a gurney ramp, and then, parked crosswise across it with the deliberate geometry of a roadblock, a black Mercedes-Benz S-Class. The kind of car that belongs to a firm. The kind of car that belongs to a man who received a message this afternoon and drove directly here without stopping. The driver's side door opens. The silhouette that emerges is as familiar to me as my own reflection in the cracked studio mirror, as familiar as 30 years of partnership and 2 glasses of scotch and a phrase we invented in 1994 for exactly this category of emergency. He is 71 years old, 6 feet tall, and wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that fits him the way a good argument fits a clear set of facts, precisely, without waste. Arthur Sterling walks toward the ambulance like a man arriving to close something. He doesn't look at the orderlies. He doesn't look at me, not yet. There will be time for that, and we both know it. He looks at the facility director, who has materialized from the entrance with the hurried, slightly panicked gait of an administrator who has been told a situation is arriving and has not been told what kind. Arthur sets his leather briefcase on the hood of the Mercedes with a sound like a gavel. Arthur Sterling, he says. The voice hasn't changed in 30 years, low, resonant, the kind of voice that fills a federal courtroom without effort. Sterling and Associates, Federal Street. He snaps the briefcase latches with both hands, and the sound of them opening carries in the cold evening air. I have a temporary restraining order issued this afternoon by Judge Patricia Alderman of the Massachusetts Superior Court, and a writ of habeas corpus covering my client Diana Thornton. He produces the papers and extends them toward the director with the specific unhurried authority of a man who has never once been told no by someone with less firepower. You will unstrap my client. You will do it now. Or I will have this facility's operating license reviewed by the Board of Registration in Medicine before you serve breakfast tomorrow. The director takes the papers. His eyes move across them with the speed of a man reading for the exit rather than the content. I watch his face from the gurney, the specific, progressive paling of someone who is calculating their personal exposure in real time. Arthur leans in. When he drops his voice, it becomes something quieter and therefore more dangerous. We have 4 hours of 4K video documenting the conspiracy to commit this woman. That includes financial communications between your evaluating physician and the petitioning party. I want you to think very carefully about whether you want to be named as a co-defendant in a kidnapping charge, or whether you would prefer to go back inside your facility and have a very quiet evening. The director looks up from the papers. He looks at Arthur. He looks at me. Then he turns to the orderlies and says, with the deflated clarity of a man who has just understood the nature of the situation he's been placed in, unstrap her. The black nylon buckles release in sequence: chest, thighs, left wrist, right wrist. Each one a small restoration. Each one a return of a thing that was mine and was taken. I sit up. My blouse is torn at the left shoulder seam, and my hair has come partially free of its usual discipline, and I am 65 years old and I have been strapped to a gurney in the back of an ambulance. These are facts. I acknowledge them the way I acknowledge any set of facts that cannot be altered, completely, without sentiment, and then I proceed. I smooth the torn silk as far as it will smooth. I reach up and press the loose strand of platinum hair back into place with 2 fingers. I straighten the brooch. Then I stand up. The transition, from horizontal, strapped, patient, to vertical, unbound, plaintiff, takes approximately 4 seconds. The air outside the ambulance is cold and smells of Boston evening and something faintly industrial, and it tastes, I decide, like winning. Arthur is at my elbow immediately, his hand hovering without quite touching. 30 years of partnership has taught him when to offer and when to wait. Diana. His voice, now that the performance is over, carries something it didn't carry in front of the director. Concern. The specific, restrained concern of a man who has seen the brooch footage and knows exactly what the last 48 hours contained. You need to be seen by a physician. Your shoulder. No. I step away from the gurney and off the ramp and onto the asphalt of the medical bay with the measured gait I have maintained since I was 26 years old. My heels click against the concrete. I need my house. He looks at me for a moment with the expression he used to wear when I proposed a legal strategy that was simultaneously brilliant and potentially catastrophic. Then the corner of his mouth moves. Of course you do, he says. The back seat of the Mercedes smells of expensive leather and the ghost of cigars. Arthur quit 12 years ago, but the upholstery has a memory, and after 48 hours of fluorescent lighting, industrial lemon, and the recycled air of a vehicle designed for transport rather than comfort, the smell of it hits me like arriving somewhere. I sit with my back against the seat and let my eyes close for exactly 30 seconds. Not sleep. Inventory. The trust has activated. The forensic chain is intact. Arthur has the data. I know this because he came, because the white lilies were his signal and his arrival is his confirmation, which means the brooch's encrypted cloud upload has been received, reviewed, and is currently sitting in a secure file at Sterling & Associates being prepared for submission as evidence. Mrs. Gable reached the safety deposit box. The real trust document is out of Mark's reach and in Arthur's possession, or will be within the hour. The $5 million wire transfer forgeries are on record. The 48-hour threshold has been crossed by, I check the dashboard clock, 23 minutes. I open my eyes. Drive me to the estate, Arthur. My voice has returned to its full register, the slight roughness from the struggle already smoothing out. And call the forensic auditors. It's time to show Mark and Paige exactly what happens when you try to break a contract with the person who wrote it. In the front seat, I hear Arthur exhale, a long, controlled breath that contains, I think, the accumulated tension of a man who has spent 48 hours mobilizing a legal counteroffensive while knowing the person at the center of it was in a studio apartment being documented by a woman with a logbook. Already called, he says. The Mercedes pulls out of the Evergreen Institute's medical bay, and I watch the facility shrink in the rear window until the gate closes behind us, and then I face forward, and I do not look back again. The Thornton estate is lit from within. Every window glowing, the warm amber of my chandelier spilling out across the cobblestone driveway where, 48 hours ago, the boxes of my life were stacked in the damp gravel. The boxes are gone now, moved inside, probably, in the assumption that the estate was theirs to organize. The Hermes scarf is wherever they put it. Arthur's security team has bypassed the lock, my own security system, which I designed with sufficient redundancy that a competent technician with the right credentials can override the exterior keypad without damaging the mechanism. The heavy oak door, the one I commissioned in Vermont 30 years ago, stands open. I walk through it without breaking stride. The foyer. The chandelier. The smell of old paper and floor wax and the particular atmospheric weight of a house that has been inhabited by the wrong people for 2 days and knows it. I register all of this in the first 4 steps, and then I hear, from the direction of my study, laughter. Not the laughter of people who are nervous or celebrating modestly. The full-throated, self-congratulatory laughter of people who believe the outcome is settled. I push open the study doors. The scene composes itself in the way that certain moments do, with a clarity and completeness that the mind files permanently rather than letting it blur with time. Mark and Paige, standing near the mahogany desk, each holding a crystal glass. My crystal. My 30-year-old Scotch. I can identify the bottle from across the room, the distinctive squat silhouette of the Glenfarclas 30, which costs more per glass than most people spend on dinner. 2 men I don't recognize occupy the chairs near the window, junior lawyers, from the look of them, the kind kept on retainer for work that doesn't require a senior partner's judgment. They have the slightly predatory alertness of people waiting for a transaction to close. Mark is holding a stack of documents against his chest. I can see the familiar paper weight, the typeface. The forged trust documents from the safe's primary shelf, which he believes are the genuine article. Then he sees me. The laughter stops the way a power failure stops a room, instantaneously, completely, and with a new and total silence that is its own kind of statement. Paige's glass lowers. One of the junior lawyers half rises from his chair and then, not knowing what the correct response is, sits back down. Mark's face moves through several expressions in quick succession, like a card shuffle that ends on the wrong card. Recognition. Confusion. The rapid, desperate recalculation of a man whose model of reality has just been revised without his consent. I am disheveled. My blouse is torn. My hair has a strand out of place. I am standing in the doorway of my own study at 8:30 on a Saturday night after 48 hours in a studio apartment and the back of an ambulance, and I am the most composed person in this room by a margin that requires no measurement. I let them look at me for exactly 3 seconds. Then I walk in. You're supposed to be in intake, Mark says. The words come out thin, the corporate authority failing to fully inflate them. His grip on the documents has tightened. I can see the widening of his knuckles. This is trespassing, Diana. You've been legally declared. I raise my left hand. A single, unhurried gesture, flat palm, fingers together. He stops. 40 years of courtrooms. The hand that stops argument. The hand that says I have heard enough of that particular line of reasoning and we are proceeding differently now. I'm here for the final accounting, Mark. My voice fills the study the way it was always designed to fill rooms, not loudly, but completely. No space left for competing sounds. You've been so thorough with the safe's primary shelf. I'm impressed by your diligence. I move toward the safe with the measured gait, heels on hardwood, the specific rhythm of a woman arriving at a conclusion. You missed the secondary compartment. I stop in front of the safe and turn to look at him. Go ahead, I say. Open it. The final asset is waiting for the master of the house. He moves like a man in a dream, the specific, slightly slow quality of someone whose cognitive processing has been disrupted by information it hasn't finished integrating. His body follows the instruction before his mind has decided to trust it, because the instruction engages the one reflex that has governed every decision he's made in the past 6 months: greed. He crosses to the safe. He spins the dial. The heavy door swings open, and he reaches past the primary shelf, past the forgeries he placed there himself, which remain exactly where he left them, and finds, at the back of the cavity, the recessed tray I had built into the safe's interior by the same technician who installed it, at my request, in 2009. A secondary compartment, invisible unless you know it exists, accessible only if you know to press the release on the left interior wall. Mark doesn't know to press the release. He finds it anyway, because I built the tray to be found by someone searching thoroughly, and Mark is, to his credit, thorough when the stakes are high enough. His hand comes back out. He's holding a stack of papers banded together, a thick stack, the weight of something substantial. He looks at them. His face, which has been cycling through expressions for the past 2 minutes, goes through one final sequence and then arrives at stillness. The stillness of a man who has reached the bottom of the calculation and found that the number there is not what he expected. Unpaid motel bills. A decade old. Mine, from the year after Robert died, when I couldn't make myself sleep in our bedroom and spent 3 months in a suite at the Elliott Hotel, running up a bill I paid in cash because I didn't want the line item in my accounts to be a record of that particular vulnerability. I kept them because I keep everything that reminds me of where I've been and why I keep moving. On top of the motel bills, a single sheet of paper. The Sterling and Associates watermark, the firm name in the crisp serif font Arthur chose when we founded the practice. And beneath the watermark, a sentence I drafted myself, in the language I use when I want precision that cannot be mistaken for anything else. Mark reads it. His jaw moves once, then stops. The poison pill. My voice in the silence of the study carries the way it carried in the First Circuit, carries the way it has carried in every room where something important was being decided. Section 14.2 of the Thornton Family Trust, drafted and executed in 1998 and never subsequently amended, because I wrote it correctly the first time. I take one step toward the center of the room. Paige is near the window. The junior lawyers are very still. Mark is standing at the open safe with papers in both hands, and the papers are beginning to tremble slightly. In the event of the physical displacement of the settler from the primary residence for a period exceeding 48 consecutive hours, without documented and witness consent, I let the language land at its own pace, each clause a separate weight. All beneficiary designations are immediately and irrevocably suspended. The trust is dissolved. The assets revert to a protected fiduciary status pending forensic audit by an independent party of the settler's designation. I take another step, this one toward Paige. She is looking at me with her arms at her sides and her face doing something I haven't seen on it since she was very small, open, unguarded, the face of someone who has not yet learned to manage what they're feeling. It would move me, perhaps, under different circumstances. Different choices. The 48th hour passed at 6:14 p.m. this evening, I say. The ambulance doors closed at 6:15. The Thornton estate, all $45 million of it, no longer exists as an instrument of your inheritance. The moment that ambulance moved, your rights were legally incinerated. I hold her gaze. You aren't heirs. You're guests. And you have overstayed your welcome. Arthur steps forward from the doorway. He has been standing there since I began speaking, which is the correct position, the position of a man who understands that some closing arguments require a single voice, and sets a tablet on the mahogany desk. He presses play. The screen fills with Mark's face, lit from below by the desk lamp in this very room, 48 hours ago. The image is 4K, precise, clear, the specific sharpness of a professional recording made by a device designed for exactly this purpose. Mark at my desk, holding my pen. The deliberate, focused concentration of a man practicing a signature that isn't his. The audio comes up, the scratch of the pen nib, the sound of his breathing, and then the low, tight, deeply personal voice of a man alone in a room he believes is private. "Come on, you old bitch." He is looking at himself. I watch him watch himself, and I observe the specific, clinical phenomenon of a person encountering the record of something they believed was unwitnessed. The way the body responds before the mind catches up, the slight backward lean, the involuntary release of held breath. That is a complete forensic evidentiary chain, Arthur says, in the voice he uses when he wants no ambiguity about what he's saying. The brooch recorded continuously for 40 hours. What's on this tablet represents the curated highlights. The full record has been submitted to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, along with documentation of the Cayman Islands shell company structure and the wire transfer authorizations bearing your client's forged signature. He pauses, letting the architecture of it settle. $5 million in fraudulent transfers. Forgery of a legal instrument. Conspiracy to commit civil commitment. You should call your attorney, Mark. Tonight. The crystal glass leaves Mark's hand. Not thrown, released. The grip simply fails, the way grip fails when the hands receive information the brain cannot process fast enough to act on. The glass falls from approximately chest height and strikes the edge of the Persian rug, the Hirais, 18th century, $300,000, the single most valuable object in the room apart from the scotch, and shatters. The sound is very clean in the silence. Mark looks at the broken glass on the rug he thought he owned 10 minutes ago. Then he looks at Paige. The look contains something I recognize as the specific communication of people who have been in a conspiracy together and are now calculating whether the conspiracy still serves them or whether it has become a shared liability. Paige has backed into the corner near the bookshelf. Her face is a mask of horror, not grief, not remorse, but the clean, forward-looking horror of a person looking directly at consequences. She does not go to him. He is sweating. The forehead first, then the upper lip, the visible, involuntary manifestation of a nervous system under extreme load. This is the man who sat in my dining room for 15 years and looked at me across the table and decided, at some point and with some calculation I will never entirely reconstruct, that I was past my usefulness and available for liquidation. He is 44 years old, and he is looking at 20 years in a federal facility, and the disposable senior he tried to bury is standing at the center of her own study, watching him understand what he has done. I feel no satisfaction in his fear. That surprises me, mildly. I expected to feel something sharper. What I feel instead is the clean, functional clarity of a closed case. The evidence is assembled, the charges are accurate, the outcome is inevitable. Justice is not a feeling. It is a structure. And this structure is sound. Paige pushes away from the bookshelf. She crosses the room toward me, and her hand comes out, reaching, the gesture of a daughter who has run out of strategy and returned to something older. Her eyes are wet. Her face is everything she has been trying to manage for the past 6 months, released all at once, and it is the face of the girl who ran into cold water without waiting, who argued with me for 3 hours and won, who I sat beside at her father's funeral and held without speaking because there are kinds of grief that don't have language. Mom, please. Her voice breaks on the second word. We can fix this. We can, we're family, Mom. We're family. I look at her. I look at her the way I look at every piece of evidence that has passed through my hands in 40 years, with complete attention, without sentimentality, reading what is actually there rather than what I wish were there. What I see is my daughter. What I also see, and these are not mutually exclusive, this is the part that required the full 48 hours and a gurney and a torn silk blouse to complete my understanding of, is a person who made a choice. Not one choice, not a single terrible moment of weakness or panic. A series of choices, made over months, that included the preparation of forged medical evaluations and leverage against my grandchildren and a studio apartment with one barred window and a caregiver whose job was to document my dissolution. Loyalty is the only currency that matters. She went bankrupt long ago. Loyalty is the only currency that matters, Paige. My voice is level and clear and entirely without performance. You went bankrupt long ago. I turn my back on her. The movement is final, not dramatic, not theatrical. Simply the decisive close of a document that has been fully reviewed and signed and filed. I walk to my desk. I pull out my chair. I sit down. Arthur. I straighten the desk lamp. Have them removed. If either of them sets foot on this property again, file the trespassing charges immediately. The silence that follows their departure, the sound of junior lawyers gathering papers, of Mark being spoken to in low, firm tones, of Paige's heels in the foyer, of the heavy oak door closing, is the most complete silence I have ever heard. It has the specific quality of a room that has returned to itself. 2 weeks later. The suite is on the 4th floor, overlooking the common. From the window, the old elms, the frog pond, the familiar geometry of Beacon Street curving away toward the hill. Boston at early evening, the light going amber and long across the park, the city settling into its evening register. The estate is sold. The process took 9 days once the forensic audit confirmed the trust's dissolution and the reversion of assets to fiduciary control. The proceeds, all $45 million, net of transaction costs and legal fees, have been transferred into the Thornton Foundation for Elder Legal Defense, a private operating foundation whose charter I spent 40 years in the law drafting in 36 hours because when you know what you're doing, speed is simply efficiency. The suite is quiet. Ordered. The furniture is good quality without being demonstrative. The bed is the correct firmness. The room smells of nothing institutional, no industrial lemon, no recycled ambulance air, no eggshell walls with their accumulated weight of other people's winters. It smells of the city and good cotton and the 30-year-old scotch in the glass on the side table. My Patek Philippe reads 6:47 p.m. I pick up my phone. The contacts list opens with the efficient responsiveness of a well-maintained device. I scroll. The entries pass in alphabetical order, the architecture of a professional life, colleagues and clients and the phone number for the electrician who finally achieved the correct amber tone for my chandelier. Paige. I look at the name for a moment. My thumb rests against the screen without pressing. I think about what I feel, because I have always believed in accuracy, and accuracy requires honest inventory. I feel the absence of something, the specific negative space left by the amputation of something that was once integral. Not grief, exactly. Not anger. The clean, forward-looking feeling of a woman who has been presented with a problem, has addressed the problem with every available instrument, and has closed the file. I feel the satisfaction of a closed case. I press delete. The confirmation prompt appears. Delete contact. This cannot be undone. I read it. I appreciate its precision. This cannot be undone is accurate. I wrote similar language into 100 contracts, the irreversibility clause, the finality provision, the language that says, this moment constitutes a point of no return for all parties, acknowledge and proceed. I always included it when I wanted the parties to understand that what they were signing was real. I press confirm. The name disappears. I set the phone face down on the table. I pick up the scotch, 30 years old, the age at which a thing has been given enough time to become entirely itself, and I take a sip. The warmth of it moves through my chest and settles. Outside the window, the sun drops below the Boston skyline. The last of the amber light stretches long across the common, catching the bare branches of the elms and holding them for a moment in gold before letting them go into the blue of evening. I watch it. My back is straight. My hands are steady. My platinum hair is in place. The brooch is back at my lapel, deactivated now, its work complete, its record submitted, its evidence already building the architecture of a federal prosecution that will proceed without any further participation from me. I am 65 years old. I am sitting in a room that is entirely mine. And for the first time since the keypad showed me a red light on a cold Boston Thursday, in the quiet of a suite overlooking the city I have inhabited for 4 decades, with the weight of a 30-year scotch in my hand and the silence of a closed file around me, I smile. Not the thin, enigmatic Mona Lisa of a woman managing her position. Not the calculated, controlled expression I wear in rooms where I am being assessed. The real one. The one that means I've won. If you made it to this moment, thank you for listening all the way through. Most people bail before the bill comes due. But here, the bill always comes due. What started as humiliation and disrespect ended with receipts, truth, and a payoff they never saw coming. If you want more stories where karma shows up without mercy, hit subscribe and come back for the next one. Now tell me in the comments, what was the most disgusting thing they did? What crossed the line for you?